Kính chào quý độc giả của Bloomberg Businessweek Vietnam. Tôi là Nguyên Lê, là một nhà báo, nhà phê bình và là một dịch giả đang cộng tác với rất là nhiều tạp chí điện ảnh trong nước và ngoài nước và cũng có mặt tại rất là nhiều liên hoan phim trong nước và ngoài nước. Trong buổi trò chuyện hôm nay thì chúng ta sẽ cùng với anh Tony Bùi nhìn lại hành trình của anh trở về Việt Nam, bàn về tiềm năng phát triển tài năng điện ảnh Việt và quan trọng nữa là những chiến lược để giúp cho điện ảnh trong nước vươn ra thế giới. Tony, it's very nice to have you here. It's very nice to meet you again, actually, and very nice to talk to you about filmmaking and everything like that. So, I know that you've just been at DANAFF, same as I, and how did you find it overall? Is it your first time in DANAFF?
First time DANAFF, not my first time in Da Nang, but first time in DANAFF. And yeah, it's good to see you again. I saw you at the festival. We actually saw each other. We're kind of surprised to see each other.
Yes.
I don't know why we were surprised, but we were. I thought it was a really great festival. You know, I didn't know what to expect. It was actually my first time to DANAFF. I know that film festivals in Vietnam are still a very new thing. I think it's an incredibly important thing to have. So honestly, I was very surprised by a lot of what I saw, and in a way that I was pleasantly surprised.
Alrighty. Obviously, DANAFF is not the only sort of festival, or how I would more say like a cinematic gathering in Vietnam. But from your perspective, what value do these film gatherings bring to the Vietnamese film ecosystem in terms of creativity, audience development, cultural tourism, or things of those sorts?
So I'm a huge believer in film festivals. I'm a product of film festivals. You know, when I was in film school, I used to have the Sundance Film Festival, like the poster on my wall. That's something like a lot of us filmmakers aspired to go to. Because even then, it had such, you know, Sundance had that cultural name, the cultural power. You know, we knew that getting a film into a festival like Sundance, if you're in America, carried a lot of weight. Back then it was probably in its like 20th or 20-something, 25th year or something. And it already had this power and this name to it, right? So that's something that can be built here in Vietnam. And I think DANAFF is, you know, I think they're in their third year this year. I think it's an important step in that direction in creating that brand, that model. But, you know, aside from the brand of it and what can be achieved, and the branding of it actually is really important because, so that, you know, if you think about Sundance, it creates a certain feeling, right? You think about the Toronto Film Festival, it creates a certain feeling. Cannes, of course, they've been around for many decades. Venice, Busan now growing, right? And the Busan was started as a regional festival, now has this, you know, international, you know, power and name to it. And Vietnam needs that, and DANAFF is uniquely situated to be that festival. And what I love about DANAFF as well is that the obviously the person running the festival director, Madam Ngo Phuong Lan, is a cinephile herself. You know, like I've had conversations with her about, you know, cinema from Central Asia. She studied cinema and got her, you know, I think a PhD from like the Moscow University, right? And she loves cinema, right? So you can see that for her, it's something that is, you know, obviously something that she wants to grow into something meaningful and impactful, but also just to support storytelling in Vietnamese films.
So how do these film festivals benefit filmmakers?
You know, we think about festivals as a place to showcase films, showcase cinema. That, of course, is sort of its base. That's its baseline. That's what it's supposed to do. But more importantly, you know, act as a hub for a lot of creative talent. So you have like all these filmmakers who come, who may know each other, but don't have really a space to gather, talk for an entire week, right? Exchange ideas, you know, what films they're doing next, exchange, you know, sort of the projects they're doing. So that's for the Vietnamese filmmakers. But because it's also an international festival, it brings in filmmakers from around the world. For this one, it's Asia, right? Since it's Asian Film Festival. So you get that. So the Vietnamese filmmakers and Vietnamese audiences get exposed now to also global standards, global, you know, talent. And in return, the filmmakers and producers, financiers from around Asia who come to DANAFF, you know, get exposed to the next wave of Vietnamese talent. So that's really important. So it works as both a cultural hub, but also a commercial hub. And DANAFF is doing what other festivals have done to great success, including Sundance, Busan, and others, is to create a market out of it. Right? Now with Project Market, I think this is their first year doing it.
Correct, yes.
Yeah, so that now allows for not only a cultural space, but also a you know, a commercial space as well, where films can be pitched, talked about, developed, time with, you know, producers and financiers. And so that's something that, again, is still in its infancy, but we can grow into something substantial.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, even like earlier I said about, you know, it's more of a cinematic gathering than a than film festival. But even as a cinematic gathering, it still doesn't quite cover what exactly is a film festival is. It's more, like you said, it's more than just showcasing your films, but it's also to showcase your films in progress, your works in progress as well. And obviously projects in need of development, meeting potential investors and people who might be able to realize your dreams or your little seed of an idea. And speaking of that, at DANAFF, I believe that you held a forum or you held a seminar of sorts where you talk about Sundance Labs.
Yeah.
That's the clear sign that you're a product of a film festival. But other than that, it's something of, I think, that's very crucial for filmmakers, not only just new filmmakers, but also veterans as well, to know that there's some sort of support system, some sort of creative support system for their kind of projects. Could you tell us more about Sundance Labs or Cinema Labs, or and how would it benefit this film industry?
Okay, so this is going to be sort of a layered and possibly somewhat long answer because it's actually a really important question, but there's a lot of steps to it to answer. First of all, I was invited to come to speak at a seminar. So I was a guest mentor for the project workshop. Then I worked one-on-one with the filmmakers at DANAFF for their working on their stories and development and pitching. And then I got invited to speak at a seminar on the topic of how to use global models, successful global models, to support Vietnamese talent. So it's an important question, right? And basically, how do we take what's successful in other countries, and how do we implement those models here? And even if we should, if so, how do we do it, right? And to get the same success. I'm a big believer in film education. I'm not only a filmmaker now, but I'm an academic. I teach film at Columbia University, and I believe in the ideas of mentorship, and also because I'm a product of that. So I, early in my career, again, like I said before, the Sundance Film Festival, its name has so much power because it's a festival that had, like a lot of films have come through there, get sold, and become, culturally significant, right? But also, its power also comes from its lab. Right. The Sundance screenwriting directing labs are world renowned. An incredible amount of filmmakers from Quentin Tarantino to Chloe Zhao, who won Best Picture for Nomadland, to Barry Jenkins with this film Moonlight, to Ryan Coogler, who just did Sinners and obviously did Black Panther, and just many, many filmmakers have gone through the Sundance Labs. Paul T. Anderson directed There Will Be Blood. I mean, I can go on and on. I think I did some research on it. Something like over 40 Oscar nominations or wins or by filmmakers have graduated from Sundance Labs.
So, Anthony, what makes your lab different from other film programs that are out there in Vietnam right now?
Film industry in Vietnam is still very young in many ways, right? It's still growing. And so there's different areas in which it needs to improve on. But the key when you talk to filmmakers and talk to producers and talk to directors, the key area where Vietnam needs to grow is in the area of screenwriting. If screenwriting and the screenwriting craft can be improved here in Vietnam, then it sort of like is, the thing that lifts up all boats, right? And that's where something like, again, Sundance Lab excels at. Screenwriting Lab is world renowned. It's not the only game in town, but it's really the one that has over 40 years of working through its process. It's created something really special, right? And so, and the support system for it. So it's about obviously recognizing that there's a need. We do need it here, recognizing that there's ways to create a lab with, and to create a lab like that, we really have to obviously bring in mentors from outside of Vietnam to come in as well, and have a support system in America, work with a lot of these people. It's something that can definitely help bring to Vietnam. So what the lab does is just as a place where you can come, you can work with these mentors, you can work with your fellow film screenwriters, and you work through your different scenes, you work through your screenplay. You do table readings. There's a process, that you go through that I think is different than the labs here. And you can bring in world-class ideas that have proven successful in these other models. And what's great about the lab system is you start as part of the screenwriting lab, and then that moves into what's called the directing lab. So projects taken from the screenwriting lab then go into the directing lab, and those projects actually you get directing. So in the screenwriting lab, you get screenwriting mentors. Directing lab, you get directing mentors, acting mentors, cinematography mentors, on different levels of mentors. And you work and you shoot scenes from your film. That's something that is not done here in Vietnam. Something still very unique. And it takes, it takes a support system, right? At a sort of the cultural institutional level, government level, but also from business level and business investors, and the benefit from that, obviously beyond just film as an investment, but also there's a strong culture component that's very important, because films that are made in Vietnam about Vietnam on Vietnamese stories that are successful and goes out globally, goes out into the world. Well, that's soft power, right? That's a way of extending the reach of Vietnam, showcasing talent.
So like a proper training ground before you go out and about, right?
Proper training out before you go and make your film.
Yeah.
But it's more than just proper. It's very intensive, and it's a way to create a certain level of craftsmanship, and refinement to get the filmmakers to the point where when they're ready to shoot, they've already worked through a lot of the problems. I mean, at the Sundance Lab when I was there, and still the format still exists today, you shoot 3 scenes, and every week you shoot a new scene. I mean, that's like an incredible thing to do, right? Because usually, you get to workshop your screenplay, and it's all theoretical. In most of the labs right now, it's really theoretical. So like even the workshop that I taught in DANAFF at the Da Nang Film Festival, there's a lot of theory, you go through ideas, but then how do you apply it? The labs allow you to apply it in real time and then get critique on that application immediately as well. So it's incredibly important. Yeah, but not only from the screenwriting point, because after you give you all the notes, you go back, you write, and you submit those pages, and you get more notes from the mentors. And when I say mentors, I'm talking about like Oscar level screenwriters who come and mentor you, or world renowned level. And then those projects move into the director's lab, and you get the same level of caliber mentors. But the beauty of the directing part is you actually get to shoot those scenes now. So they bring in actors, they bring in crew, they bring in editors for you and all that, and you shoot scenes, and it's an amazing thing to do, to have that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So it's not just craft, but it's all about community building as well?
Yeah, so the building of the community is something that happens during the process. And but the key is obviously, because it's even in its title, Screenwriting Directing Labs, to work with the screenwriter, help the screenwriter, develop the best screenplay possible. And again, what's important about the labs is there's actually a key distinction. It's not theoretical. It's not just about, let's talk about ideas and theory and screenwriter. It's not that. It's to help develop that screenplay and get as close as possible to shooting ready,
Right.
And then directing lab, it's about getting the filmmaker as close as possible to making the film, achieve the best version of that screenplay that was developed earlier in the screenwriting lab. So it's not just theoretical. It's not just like a film school where you learn and then how you apply it, who knows in the future. It's very targeted, and that's why the selection process also is very key and very competitive, because they want to select films that they believe then has a chance of getting made. Because the whole point is there has to be life beyond the theory, and that's what makes the Sundance Lab really, really successful. But so the focus is on the screenwriter and the director. You get all these mentors come in, crew, but inevitably when you have all these people working together and all this talent and exchange of ideas and this passion, talk about storytelling, that inevitably you create a community, right? So the mentors end up creating lasting relationships with the filmmakers create relationships with their cast and crew and all that. And all that energy moves forward into the real world, and then everyone works together to make their films outside of the lab as well. And so it's a incredible space for ideas, but for community. And the other thing I want to say, which is important about this lab and why it works so well, is that it creates an incredibly safe space. This is what is very unique, because I've been part of other labs, and the thing that when you get there from day one is that you are actually asked to and almost required to fail. It's something that's not talked about a lot, and something that is one of the key sort of secret ingredients to the success of the lab. Usually, anything you do in the film industry, even when you're in film school, there is an expectation to succeed, and the metric for everything you do is how well it's done, how well it's received. Does film get into festivals, all that. But during their time at the festival, and it's said over and over again by the mentors, by again the incredible Michelle Satter, who I mentioned earlier, is that they want you to fail. It's not just it's just not like it's not something that's just said in theory, but they actually promote it. In fact, if you're doing your scenes really, really well, the idea is that you actually haven't pushed yourself enough. So, if every scene you do is perfect and everything you write is perfect, then maybe, you didn't really utilize the lab in the best way possible. It's a chance to get to know yourself. It's a chance to push the envelope, to test yourself. And they create an incredible space to fail, where they want you to fail. They want you to learn from that failure because, and they say during the lab, and I'm telling you, it's true, no other time in my life where you were able to do what's called protective failure. Like you're able to fail and you're protected with it.
Oh, I like that.
Because everywhere else you go in the world, if you do that, you'll be kicked out, fired, let go, and your film will get financed. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So and that's something that takes a lot of effort and energy to make that work and make that work right. But it can be done, and it's a little bit opposite of the way we normally think about this process, which is all built on success. But the lab creates a space of failure so that you can get the better understanding of your work, so that you can have best chances of success when you actually do it in the real world.
What do you think are the ways to make film these festivals and these hubs that are associated with them sustainable?
The benefits of it and the legacy of it is going to continue on for years to come. It's not one of those things where like you invest in it now and you get sort of impact and then you're done with it and you have to reinvest later on. Because the people who graduate from these labs and make these films will continue on for long, long careers. They will come back as mentors. They will then do their work to lift up the industry, right? In fact, a lot of the mentors now at the Sundance Lab used to be lab participants themselves, right? So, film industry, especially in the independent film sector, has been impacted greatly by the labs in America. And we can do the same thing here. And the ripple effect of it is outward, but it's also inward. And it's sustainable because they will continue on and then give back. The next generation will continue on and give back. And it creates this model that's cyclical that lifts up the entire process up, for years and hopefully generations to come.
And what do you think the next generation of Vietnamese filmmakers have to offer to the world cinema?
What Vietnamese filmmakers can offer is just that, Vietnamese films. I think so much about Vietnam. So I obviously am a filmmaker, but I'm also, educator and academic. I teach at Columbia, and I'm part of, and before that, I've mentored a lot of filmmakers. I've been on the board of Film Independent, and so I'm involved in a lot of different institutions to support the next generation filmmakers. I believe in film education. I believe in the importance of storytelling. But let's be honest. Look, I grew up in America, but I'm Vietnamese American. I was born here in Vietnam, left when I was really early. So, I'm part of the American film industry and system, and I'm a product of that. But I involved a lot in Vietnam, so I see what's here, what works well, what doesn't work well. And but I will say this: I think for a long time, and this is why Vietnamese films, Vietnamese stories are important. And for a long time, important globally, Vietnam has been defined by how other people see Vietnam. Vietnam has been defined by how other countries and other storytellers and other filmmakers talk about Vietnam. And even in my own class, I teach a Vietnam War history class. And, and in there are a lot of the films that we typically know from the Vietnam War era, or, or the American War, however you want to call it, but very few people globally, I'm saying outside of Vietnam, have seen films made by Vietnamese filmmakers about the war, like their perspective and their point of view. And so when I showed these films in class, like the students were blown away, and it's so simple. You think, oh, it's just the perspective of the other side of the conflict, right? But just by showing that other side does tremendous good and benefit and positivity, right? Because it's about voice and the importance of voice. So why do we want to support Vietnamese filmmakers? It's because it supports Vietnamese voices, Vietnamese identity. It allows for us to tell our own stories, right? If we don't, someone else will. Right? And we want to be able to do it in a way that's world class. So it's not just about, oh, la-di-da, let's tell our stories no, we still want to do it at a level and at an international standard that can compete with the stories of these other countries, right? Otherwise, no one's going to see our films, right? So the importance of it is beyond technical. It's really about, cultural power, identity, and voice. And when you think about the great, Chinese filmmakers, or the great Hong Kong filmmakers, the great French filmmakers, and that, all these names start to pop up, right? And we would love to have something like that for Vietnam, because it changes how the world sees this country. And the first and most important part of that is to own our own stories. And you can only own it by telling the stories And then now the technical and the craft comes in to tell it well. But we
Right.
first have to support the passionate filmmakers who are out there wanting to do it.
Right. So it's like we have the individuals, we have the vision already. Now we just need a community and an institution or a program of sort to nourish and to push that
Like I
further.
said, it takes a village, right? Especially in film, right? Like other things you can do, music, photography, even writing a book. You can do that in isolation by yourself quietly. Making a film takes a village. It takes a lot of people working together with a common desire, common passion. And when you have that many people together, there's also a lot of room for failure, right? Because you have a lot of different people doing a lot of different things. So, you know, these kinds of festivals or labs create a community, but also creates common language of what excellence should be. And that's something that's very important.
Awesome. All right. And as with all great visions, I hope that to see it come to realization. So thank you so much, Anthony, for being here. Yeah, on behalf of Bloomberg Business Week, we really appreciate you for sharing all this wisdom and knowledge to us today.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here, and thank you for having me, and thank you to Bloomberg Businessweek Vietnam for having me as well.